Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 3 of the Back to Basics Sports podcast. Today, I'm joined by Coach Jason Morrell. Coach Morrell, introduce yourself.
Jason Morrell, assistant principal of athletics and activities at West Everett High School. Also, our head football coach, and been coaching Michael for what feels like ever, but certainly the last 6 years, I think now.
Yeah, 6 years.
West Everett High School alum, class of 01. Bring it.
Now, Coach Morrell, he's the head football coach here. So, I mean, you want to talk about a great football mind. And when I was watching the Super Bowl, there was one man I wanted to talk to right away, and that is Coach Morrell. Because if there's one man that looks at the game at such a deeper level than just the X's and O's football, it's definitely Coach Morrell. And I know for me personally, I had a lot of feelings about the games that just weren't the X's and O's and the mindset of the teams. I had a lot to say about it. So when you look at this game, look at the Chiefs, because when they first came out the tunnel, they looked flat from right there.
So I'm glad that's where you're starting, because I really think that if the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, it might have been one of the biggest upsets in Super Bowl history. And I know that's kind of against the grain because they were supposed to win, but the deck was stacked against these guys. And think about what they went through that week.
Yeah.
Okay? You're on your third, fourth string tackles. Okay? You got some defensive players out. I think that what Andy Reid's son, who, oh, by the way, is the linebackers coach for the team, got into right before the Super Bowl creates a massive distraction.
Agreed.
That then you try to almost over-prepare for. You know what I mean? So you're trying to make it so you got to go one way or the other there. I don't know a team that would have been able to roll out of that situation and been able to run through that tunnel full throttle, because then you're trying to mask that distraction and make it not a big deal, which it obviously is a huge deal.
Beyond football too.
That's correct.
It's a huge deal.
So like, how do you handle that? So I'm not necessarily surprised. I also think they were feeling some major pressure.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pressure on that team, especially Mahomes too, because I mean, you look at Mahomes, the offseason he had last year, you win the Super Bowl. You win the Super Bowl MVP, and then now you get a $500 million contract.
Yeah.
So now you have to live up to this expectation that you're there and you're getting paid $500 million to bring this team, because people have these expectations from Mahomes that he's the next Brady, that he's going to be the greatest of all time. And this is the matchup right here that a lot of people will say would be make or break, which I don't think it's a make or break thing for Mahomes, because it's only his third year starting. So I don't think it's necessarily a make or break game. But I mean, so much pressure was on the Chiefs team and everything that happened with them, with especially Andy Reid's son. I mean, I couldn't imagine being Andy Reid. I mean, that's such a tough. Andy Reid has a tough situation going on over there.
Well, I was, Lehigh University is my alma mater, and when Andy was with the Eagles, that's where they held their preseason camp, and they would get on campus a week before our team showed up and use our facilities, and we'd practice at a different facility on campus. And I remember when his other son, Garrett, overdosed on campus. So that's what you're dealing with, and that I just can't imagine the toll that takes on his family. But to change the topic, I think Eric Bieniemy got exposed here too a little bit. And there are a lot of people out there who have been banging down the doors as to why Eric Bieniemy hasn't gotten a head coaching job yet. And when your head coach is handling that he has to handle, and now it's all on your lap, I think he got exposed.
Yeah, no, Eric Bieniemy definitely got exposed, and you would like the masterclass of coaching that was put on by Todd Bowles. Yep. I mean, Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, put on an absolute masterpiece of a game. I mean, right from the jump. I mean, the offense comes out. The Buccaneers got the ball first, 3 and out. That's not how you want to start the game, but that's what they're at that point. And then like you said, the Chiefs missing both of their tackles, missing some pieces. What does Todd Bowles do? Todd Bowles has two of the best edge rushers. Yeah, 2 of the best edge rushers in the league. Shaq Barrett leads the league in sacks over the past 2 seasons. I mean, he is a freak off the edge, and not to mention you have a grizzled veteran in Jason Pierre-Paul, who of recently has been an absolute insane off the edge.
Can't explain his recent surge.
No,
it's been ridiculous.
Not at all. I mean, I was watching the Packers game, and I'm like, where like he's been in, I feel like he's been in the NFL for ages now.
Yeah.
And look, this is the best he's looked. I mean, you're going against the top of the line guys. I mean, that's the NFC Championship against a team that everyone thought was going to blow away the Buccaneers because they were so hot. And Shaquille Barrett.
Well, where was Travis Kelce? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where was Hill?
He had a big drop.
He did, but I don't even think they targeted him.
Now, so I was watching after obviously Overreaction Monday. A lot of people were saying that Mahomes tried to get more people involved early, tried to get McCole Hardman involved early, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. It's just the secondary for the Buccaneers came to play.
They did, and I personally, my favorite, I love Devin White and the linebackers for the Buccaneers. I just think that they're outstanding, and I understand that the D ends are good, but I'm just really surprised that Eric Bieniemy did not put together a game plan to satisfy their lack of ability at tackle.
Yep, and because like you said, the lack of ability to protect Mahomes. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, stood back. I believe the stat was 92% of the time Patrick Mahomes took a snap and dropped back. There was only 5 guys blocking.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me.
That's absolutely absurd. Where you see the tide of the game, I mean, I think someone who, not even like Eric Bieniemy, but like someone just a casual person watching the game could have told you, oh, you got to protect him. I mean, he's going to get killed. You see the stat of how many yards he ran from scrambling around?
No.
497 yards of scramble yards. So just running backwards, side to side, all that, 497 yards.
Momentum-wise, and I'm not going to blame it. You know better than anybody that we're not going to blame officials.
No.
But it's really hard to reestablish momentum when you're getting chunked by 15-yard penalties left and right as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those penalties, though, and like we said, this is a game that was deeper than X's and O's. One thing I took away is look at the way the Buccaneers were. They seem composed. They all seem like they've been there before. And look at the Chiefs. The team seemed uptight. I mean, Chris Jones at the very beginning of the game was getting the 15-yarder for pushing the Ryan Jensen in the center of the Buccaneers, which I don't think you should throw the flag right there. It's the Super Bowl. Tensions are high.
Right.
You're going to be pushing and shoving. I mean, that's football at that point. It's not like they punched each other or anything like that. So I don't think there was a need for a flag there. But you just look at the way the Chiefs, something about the Chiefs to me, they just look rattled. And they didn't look like, I mean, that's a team that won the Super Bowl the year before, and the Buccaneers look like they've been to the Super Bowl 3 straight years, and they're just coming here. This is another football game in their home stadium with their home fans, and that's what it just looked like to me. And I think that's a lot to do with the aura of Tom Brady.
Yes, I will say this. Here's what happens. You're trying to be a real physical team, which the Chiefs are trying to be. I think they want to establish physicality on both sides of the ball, and sometimes that persona, it takes over too much, but officiating crews watch as much film as coaching staffs watch going into a game, especially in the NFL.
Especially in the Super Bowl, too.
We felt, at the high school level, we felt the brunt of when you're trying to be uber physical and people know you're doing that, and you get some officiating crews that are going to try to drop the hammer on you immediately.
Yep.
And I think that's what happened a little bit to the Chiefs. It certainly happened to their secondary.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna argue that Tom Brady's one of the greatest competitors.
I think he, at this point, is the greatest competitor ever.
He's definitely, when I was thinking about this morning, I thought, in a competitive situation, we're playing ping pong, and we're playing doubles ping pong. It's my team versus your team. You get first choice, and your partner choices are either Tom Brady or Kobe Bryant.
I would that's a tough question. I think I'd go Tom Brady, though. I think in that situation, I would go Tom Brady because Kobe Bryant's my favorite NBA player ever, too. I mean, not just basketball, like you said, the Mamba mentality. I mean, his killer instinct is literally named after him.
Right.
And when you look at Tom Brady, I think you're looking at a guy who's very similar to Jordan, too, because their stories were Jordan when the 1992 Dream Team where, we beat Michael one night at ping pong. Then that night, he stood up for 12 hours straight, just hitting the ball against the wall himself, and then he came back and destroyed everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Tom Brady's the exact same way because, I mean, just no question about it after the game when he was asked if he's going to be back. Oh, yeah, no, I'll be back. We're going to be back here again. I mean, something about that, I mean, the way he treats his body, too. I mean, he's 43 years old and doesn't look a day over 32. He doesn't look a day over his athletic prime. So I think that has a lot to do with the competitiveness too, because you don't want to lose the edge. I mean, we've seen guys like Phillip Rivers, who is younger than Tom Brady, called his career, and Tom Brady's still playing in the Super Bowl, winning Super Bowl MVPs.
Here's what I have the most respect for Tom Brady. back in the day, when football first started getting into the national football, like the 20s, 30s, 40s, there were a lot of player coaches.
Mm-hmm.
These are guys that actually played in the game and coached the team while playing in the game.
Yep.
That obviously disappeared 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Tom Brady is a player coach.
Yep.
You can't tell me that Byron Leftwich is really out there calling the plays. And no slight to Byron Leftwich. He's obviously doing a great job communicating with Tom Brady. But literally, the offensive coordinator is on the field touching the football every play. And that's the difference. We have not had a quarterback do that in 60 years.
Yeah, no, agree. Because when they're so close up on Tom Brady and he's getting a play, no, I'm not running that play. That play is not going to work. I mean, Tom Brady's football IQ is so far and ahead of everyone else. I mean, but I think that relationship meshed really well with him, Bruce Arians, and Byron Leftwich.
Well, it was bumpy to begin.
Yeah, in the very beginning. In the very beginning of the season, Bruce Arians called him out a lot. Yep. But then a few weeks ago, Arians says, here's the thing that was different between New England and here. I let Tom coach.
Right.
And, I mean, that was huge. I mean, like you said, it was very bumpy in the beginning. I mean, Tom Brady, they play the Saints and get destroyed in the first game of the year. Tom Brady throws 2 or 3 picks, and then Bruce Arians comes out that game, his first game as a Buccaneer with no offseason, no OTAs or anything, said, he's got to play better. That's just unacceptable here.
Yeah.
And that relationship had to improve. I don't know what the respect was gained between these two or what turned the switch on for them two to click like that. But, I mean, that relationship got good really, really quick, and it showed because, I think when you look at Tom Brady, like you said, he's a player-coach. I mean, the player-coach relationship, like the actual player-coach relationship, is very important too.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with the Rams situation, why Jared Goff isn't there.
Yeah.
That player-coach relationship is very, very important. That's ultimately the reason why Tom Brady left New England.
Yeah, I would imagine that they came into the season saying, hey, we're going to, Tom, you're going to have input. Byron's going to have input. Bruce is going to have input. Let's try to, and it's not going to work that way.
Nope.
And there came a point where it's like Tom walks in, probably after he got shouted out by his head coach, and says, listen, you want me to play better? I'm taking 80% of the control of this offense.
Yep.
And that's the way it's going to be. And if you're Byron Leftwich, who came into the league after Brady and was out of the league before Brady.
You know how many guys are like
sir.
that? It's
yes,
crazy.
Sir. Yes, sir. Whatever you say, sir.
Yeah, there's so many guys that are like that too. I mean, a lot of these guys are now analysts on ESPN or Fox Sports. I mean, and they can sit here and give you stories of playing with Tom Brady, but they're telling you as an ex-player. They're telling you as a retired player, which is crazy in so many different ways that man's 43 and still operating at the level he's operating at. But he's so far
I just
ahead of
don't think
everyone.
you can name another player. And there might have been other teams or other players in all of sports that may have won more championships than Brady and whatnot. But I don't know that there was another professional athlete that has had the impact on as many aspects of one game as he has. I mean, the way that the quarterbacks are treated now by officials, that's a Tom Brady thing.
Yeah.
Like, Tom Brady was the first guy. It's like, he's not to be touched.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then the way they've opened up the offensive game by calling so many defensive penalties, that's a Tom Brady thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to let an official know when there's a call that needs to be made, and they start skewing the professional football towards that, and I think he dictated all of that.
Yeah, Tom Brady, he definitely has a role to play with that. He's always been the guy, if he thinks he doesn't like what he sees, he's going right to the official and letting him know. And he's always been that guy. And we saw a little bit of that psycho Tom come out again on Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said about that incident right there. But I think I personally love seeing those two go at it because those are two at the best at their position. Ultimately, Tyrann Mathieu didn't have the best game in the world, but those two going at it. That right there got me so fired up. And Mike Evans even said it after the game. He said, once we saw Tom that, we knew this is it.
It's on. And I will say I totally disagree with the flag that Tyrann
100%.
Mathieu got right there. But I also disagree with Tyrann Mathieu's finger pointing that went on the entirety of the game. And that's what makes me feel like, maybe Spagnuolo and Bieniemy being handed the reins to the Super Bowl game planning because Andy Reid had to handle other stuff. I think there was some underpreparedness going on there.
And I know how much you hate like this stuff. Like when something
Can't
happens,
stand
you're
it.
like your hands up, you're sitting there on the field, middle of a play, freaking out about a blown coverage.
Yeah.
And we saw Tyrann Mathieu do that. And when he did it after him and Brady got into it.
Yeah.
And 100%, if you're going to throw a flag, throw it on both guys.
Yeah.
So have offsetting, unsportsmanlike conducts. But there shouldn't have been a flag thrown in the first place, but there was.
When you're looking at that stuff, when you're Tom Brady and you're seeing Tyrann Mathieu melt down,
yeah.
blood's in the water. You're done.
That's what you look for. I mean, when you watch film for football games, that's one thing you look for. You look for the players.
Body language.
The body language is huge, and like you look at the body language of the players as a coach and be like, we're going to attack this kid.
How can we get this kid to break, and what's the point that we know that they're breaking?
Yep, and that play on where Tom Brady threw it at Tyrann Mathieu, got the touchdown to Antonio Brown.
Yeah,
he attacked him. He knew that where he had to pick his target, and boom, right to Tyrann Mathieu, man-on-man coverage on Antonio Brown. Beautiful route by Antonio Brown.
Oh, yeah.
That was absolutely beautiful.
You talk about, I can't believe he's still in the league right now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something to be said for the way the Buccaneers have handled his situation and being able to keep him under control and around.
And that's a lot to do with Tom Brady because even when Tom was in New England last year, I want Antonio Brown. Now, Antonio Brown had a lot going on off the field, specifically at that time, with a bunch of accusations and everything. But even after that, I mean, Tom Brady invited him to live in his house in New England. When he signed with them this year with the Buccaneers, Tom said, "You can live in my house till you get settled down here." Yeah. And he did the same thing with Leonard Fournette.
Is Rob Gronkowski coming back next year?
Yes, I believe he said he's coming back.
Is he?
I believe he said he's coming back.
Warm weather climate, man. It sounds ridiculous, but it
has a lot to do with a lot of guys' decisions.
Career.
Yeah, it has a lot of guys make decisions based off where like the weather and stuff like that. Because I mean, you're up in New England. I mean, Gronk's taken a beating in his career.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of concussions. I mean, he wears that big sleeve. He was wearing that big sleeve for a reason with his elbow and his arm. His ACLs have been torn a few times. I mean, I think he tore both of them at like some points in his career. But I mean, that means a lot. Like going into the warm climate, going with your best friend who's been your quarterback your entire career.
Yep.
I mean, that holds a lot of significance, and he's definitely coming back. And I think Antonio Brown's going to come back too.
Is there anybody in the AFC that can compete with the Chiefs going into next year, off the top of your head? Or are we going to see a rematch?
I think the Bills. I think the Bills have a good shot because I think the Chiefs are exposed now. I think the big thing that you take away from the game, not how dominant the Buccaneers look, but the Chiefs got exposed. And we saw this at the end of the first meeting with the Chiefs and Buccaneers. After the first quarter, they started playing too high.
Right.
And the too high brackets Tyreek Hill so he doesn't go off for 206 yards in a quarter. What they did was they just dropped their two safeties back. They trust the pass rush. I think if you look at you get a team that has a solid pass rush and can drop two back. I mean, the Chiefs got exposed bad in that aspect.
How many other teams have a linebacking core?
No,
like
Devin White was a big part of the Super Bowl.
That's what the killer is.
Yeah,
like,
no, I agree.
Front's fine, but if you have linebackers that are going to run sideline to sideline, you are in a really good place.
Ready for this one? The Colts.
Really?
The Colts. Darius Leonard. You want to talk about linebackers?
Okay.
You want to talk about linebackers right there? I mean, that team's a quarterback away from being a huge team in the AFC.
I love the Colts, and here's why I love the Colts. They built the right way.
Yes.
Up front.
They built the way they built was insane.
That offensive line was built over 2 drafts, and they are the best offensive line in football, in my opinion.
I don't think there's a question whether or not that's the best offensive line in football. I mean, the year that up until that point, before they drafted Quentin Nelson, that year before.
AKA, or also, did you know, Quentin Nelson, Jersey product.
Yeah.
From?
I want to say no. I don't want.
Central Jersey Catholic School. We played against him when I was head coach at Monmouth Regional.
I don't know. I know he's a Jersey kid.
Red Bank Catholic.
That's where I know he was a Jersey kid.
Jersey,
and then went to Notre Dame and
freakazoid.
He's a freak. I mean, he's huge. He's athletic. I mean,
nasty.
By the time it's all said and done, he could potentially be one of the best guards.
Totally agree.
To play football. Yeah. And we were talking a lot of the linemen, me being a guard and everything. Me and Chase Austin were talking a lot about Quentin Nelson. We're like, listen, there's been some nasty guards who played some football, but I mean, Quentin Nelson is.
Yeah.
This is his third year, and he's 3-time All-Pro, and he's been absolutely ridiculous. And he's that draft pick right there, that lineman draft pick. Some people say you got to go quarterback, you got to go playmaker on either side of the ball. That pick right there solidified the Colts, and that he is the golden piece to that team. He is the glue that makes that team stick together.
Jonathan Taylor is not bad either. Another South Jersey product.
Salem, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you might be right. I think and I appreciate Indianapolis's defense. I think they need some edge rushers.
Agreed. Because that
internally,
Justin Houston isn't going to be it.
But yeah, correct. I agree. But I don't know if there's a quarterback out there that don't say it. Don't say it.
I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's
I think whoever takes. He's talking about Carson Wentz, obviously, but whoever takes that deal, I think the Eagles have to try it. And if you're stupid enough to take the deal, you're stupid enough to take the deal.
Can't do it. Not worth it.
No, I don't think it's worth it at all. And the Colts that's their missing piece. Though, is the quarterback, and obviously with people like the Frank Reich and Carson Wentz connection, is it worth all that money though? And I don't think it's a question that it's absolutely not worth all that money.
I can't remember seeing someone take as many steps backwards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So quickly as at the quarterback position. Like usually they come in and they're either a dud right off the bat, or they're okay, they get better, or they're a superstar. I've never seen a guy come in, show a lot of promise, and then digress the way that Carson Wentz has digressed. And I don't know that there's anybody out there that's going to be able to pull him out of that tailspin because of he's got to be so jaded by everything.
Yeah, I think the way his season ended last year, definitely not the way you want to end the season at all. I mean, that definitely took a shot to his confidence right then and there because, I mean, I thought Jalen Hurts was okay, nothing spectacular. He wasn't bad. But I thought he was okay.
I don't know if he can survive though in the NFL.
I agree. I don't think his style of play is going to be something that's going to maintain, especially if you're playing behind that offensive line. I don't think you're going to see very, very many years out of Jalen Hurts to put it that way. But I mean, the Colts are a quarterback away. But other than that, I mean, I don't know if there's another team who can play with the Chiefs like that. But the problem is with the Chiefs is that they're going to have to pay all these guys at some point. They got Mahomes. Believe they have Kelsey signed in for a few years. But what are you going to do with Tyreek Hill? I mean, Sammy Watkins, you can get back cheap. McCole Harmon, you can get back cheap. Running back, you can just draft. You can draft whenever you want. Running back is not a position you need to pay all that money towards. But you need to rebuild offensively.
The question is, who's more important to you, Tyreek Hill or Patrick Mahomes? If it's Patrick Mahomes, you need to get some linemen.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to hit on because Mitchell Schwartz, it's either this was his last year or he's done very soon.
Yeah.
Eric Fisher, blown out his Achilles. That's a hard injury to come back from, especially if you're a 300
pound.
Yep. So I mean, you gotta get some protection because we saw what happens when you don't have protection.
Yeah.
And you got to prioritize. You're absolutely right. You got to prioritize. Do you think Patrick Mahomes, they basically already made a priority because they gave him $500 million over 10 years, but that's going to be a bad 10 years if they don't get someone to protect him.
Well, you talked about being exposed, and Tyreek Hill was not what they needed him to be
not at all.
When they needed him the most.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can blame Eric Bieniemy for that, or you can say, well, shoot, if the Bucks can expose him, then the league can expose him, and that's all that's going to happen.
I think that's a big problem with what you saw from the Super Bowl, because I'm sure we're gonna talk about Devin White a lot in a little bit, but I mean the secondary played really well, and don't get me wrong, that secondary remembered what Tyreek Hill did to them that last game as Antoine Winfield threw up this to him, which I absolutely loved that.
I'm sure you did.
I loved it because
you love handshakes and high fives running down the sideline for touchdowns too.
But, I mean, Tyreek Hill, I mean, he went off in that first game. I mean, 206 yards in the first quarter and 3 touchdowns. That's historic.
Yeah.
I mean, you can put that as one of the best performances ever, and that was in a quarter. So when you take a look at that Chiefs secondary, who's very young, or the Buccaneers secondary is very young. We have Sean Murphy Bunting's very young. Mm-hmm. You got Carlton Davis very young. Antoine Winfield Jr. is a
he's a player. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's a beast.
Yeah.
And he's a rookie, too. And that's what I was getting. He's a rookie. And, I mean, his dad obviously played in the NFL for the Vikings. But, I mean, that secondary is so young, and they've grown up so much because that was – a lot of people said that's the weak point of the Buccaneers. And I think that game, the reason the Buccaneers had so much success was that they needed that.
Yeah.
They needed that Tyreek Hill backflipping in front of their eyes. They needed Tyreek Hill running past Antoine Winfield, throwing up the peace sign. They needed that because if you take that game and then go and from after the first quarter and just go on to no first quarter, none of that stuff happened. The Buccaneers win 24. They win 24-3. That would be the final score.
So, Todd Bowles.
He's going to be a head coach then.
But is that the right move for him?
I don't think it's the right move for him. I think he should stay right where he's at.
Some guys are just better coordinators.
I agree. And Todd Bowles is one of those guys. We saw him as a head coach of the Jets.
Yes.
And not very pretty.
No.
And he's a great defensive mind, though. And I think those guys on the Buccaneers staff need to stay together. It's hard because you got the head coaching job, money, you have the opportunity to build your own team and stuff like that. But I think if you're Leftwich, if you're Todd Bowles, if you're any of those guys, I think you stay there.
Yeah, 100%, because you have the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. Like, you're going to go somewhere where you're not going to have the pieces. And if you like winning, stay where the pieces are.
Yeah,
you're making enough money. You already tried to be a head coach one time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, grow your legacy with Devin White. You know, and let him be a Hall of Fame caliber linebacker. And that's the one of the most interesting things I'm going to see next year is, can Devin White continue to be, you know, as disruptive as he is?
Yeah,
right
what play was Devin White not involved in?
I know.
And I mean, he got stick with the hard job of sticking on Travis Kelce. Well, a lot of people said one of the best tight ends in the league. I think you could put George Kittle in that conversation, and it's either Kelce or George Kittle. Devin White had the challenge of being on Travis Kelce and passed A+. Absolutely passed, and not only did he have that challenge, but he was the absolute dynamic playmaker that was all over the field, had a few pass deflections, finally gets the pick at the end of the game. But, I mean, if Tom Brady was on the Buccaneers, that's easily my Super Bowl MVP.
What I like about Devin White, and I saw it a lot in the Green Bay game, in their first-round game against Washington, is his ability to communicate. Like, he is the guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's the coach on the field. He is the captain of that squad. And I remember showing close-ups in the huddle of him, and he plays with such ferocity, but he's always in control, man.
Yes.
Always in control. And you can just tell by the way he's talking to his teammates, to his linebacking core, and making sure that we're doing, you know, where we're at when we need to be there. And then he just cuts it loose.
Yeah, I think walking away from that game, that was the player I was the most blown away with.
Yeah.
Was Devin White. And I think anyone who was watching that game, I mean, you saw 45 the whole time. I mean, he was flying. Yeah. I mean, he's going out, middle linebacker, going out down 15 yards and making the tackle. I mean, his football IQ was incredible.
I mean, he's
all
coming
throughout
out
the
of
game.
coverages, making plays.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you talk about Patrick Mahomes running 435 yards of scramble yards. I want to see the stats on Devin White's.
Yeah, how many yards he covered?
He covered during that game. I mean,
he's a freak athlete. I believe he ran a 4.4.
And that's the new style. That's the new linebackers in the NFL.
Yes.
Long gone are the days of 6'3", 250.
Yep.
You know, you need to be 6'1", 220 pounds, and you can fly.
Yes.
Long arms and can fly.
Because you can develop those guys, too, into football IQ, into knowing your defense. You can develop those guys, but, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, those days of those huge, like your Brian Urlachers, I mean, that day's over.
Yeah, I mean, it's about speed.
Yeah.
It's about speed and length.
Especially now with this league. I mean, especially if Tyreek Hill, people say might be the fastest NFL player ever. I mean, the Chiefs have a track team of wideouts. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of teams are starting to go with speed. That 40-yard dash time is not just a pretty combine stat. It's a lot of things that the teams look at now when selecting a wideout because you can develop route running. You can develop that stuff like that, but speed is something that if you see like a 4.3 speed from a guy, 4.4 speed, you're like, we can develop this guy.
And that's what I would say about Devin White is I don't know how much that the Bucs developed his IQ and savvy. I think he has it.
Yeah.
And that allows him to be faster because 40s are one thing, but 40 yards on like actual field speed, in-game speed, on the defense side of the ball, that comes from knowledge and preparation.
And I think, like you said, Devin White, he was probably him and Todd Bowles. I can only imagine how good that relationship is. I'm sure Devin White is sitting there calling Todd Bowles up every night. Hey, coach, like I saw this, that, and the other, and I think this is a good idea. And I'm sure those two had incredible conversations, whether it was in a meeting room or a phone call. But, I mean, Devin White is a guy who, like we said, Tom Brady was a coach in the field. Devin White is that guy.
Yeah.
He is if Todd Bowles was on the field at middle linebacker, was 6'1", 230, 220, and could fly like that. I mean, his performance was absolutely outstanding.
If the Bucs lost Devin White to injury, are they anywhere as good defensively? Do you think they're that good defensively?
I think they take a step back. I don't think they're going to be as dominant because, I mean, that like he said, he's the glue that brings that team together, because you can ask him to make plays, you can ask him to drop back in coverage, you can ask him to play man on somebody. So I think they definitely take a step back. But you have Levante David too, who's your other linebacker. So I think when you have like a veteran like Levante David, who I'm sure is picked up, I don't think Levante David's as natural as Devin White, but I mean he's been there. And so that I'm sure that he has the values installed of the team, their philosophy and everything, how they want to approach the game. But I think they would take a step back if Devin White gets hurt.